Hello and welcome. In this episode, we're going to break down what has happened in the Ukraine-Russia war and especially behind the scenes over the last 2 days. Let's dive right in. In an interview with TASS, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov left no doubt that Russia is aiming to achieve peace through victory. He says has nothing changed, that Russia is seeking the demilitarization and the denazification of Ukraine, which means Ukraine should be turned into a country that can't defend itself from further Russian aggression, and he wants regime change. He also demanded that the Western world has to accept the annexations as a fact and that there will not be any changes to that anymore. Also, the Kremlin spokesperson Peskov said basically the same, that no peace initiative, not even in front of the United Nations, makes sense as long as the entry of the annexed territories into the Russian Federation is not accepted. We're talking, just to remind you, we're talking about Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson in this context now, because Russia is assuming that Crimea is already a part of Russia as it has annexed it before, but it's not. It hasn't received international recognition neither. While the British Ministry of Defense was confirming that at least parts of the First Guards tank army are in Belarus, the Ukrainian General Staff is saying they still can't spot any offensive buildup along the border. So while there are troops coming to Belarus, at this point, they do not expect an attack out of Belarus in the near future. Also, just a few hours ago, Ukraine has been faced with another big attack with cruise missiles. There were some rumors initially that this might be the biggest one up to date, but right now the latest information I have was that at least 69 cruise missiles were used and 11 Shahed cruise missile drones. They are usually called kamikaze drones. So this would be a little smaller than previous attacks, and the Ukrainians claim that out of the 69 used cruise missiles, 54 were shot down. We have here a video that is currently circulating of that should be a Caliber that is shot down, I think, with an Igla manpad. But if I'm not completely wrong, while I've seen it circling around in connection to this attack now, I think this video has been published a few weeks ago already. So I cannot confirm, just because I was already mentioned in this regard on Twitter, that I should maybe add this and so on. So I don't think it actually shows the current attack that it was defended, but here you have it. We also have information that is fairly interesting, that Engels Air Force Base has been attacked again, it seems, at least. So the Russian side said that the air defense has turned on and has fired at something. So was there another Ukrainian attack? Well, maybe not, because some other Russians say that supposedly they mistakenly shot down an own plane as Sukhoi 27. So at least at this point, we can confirm that the Russian air defenses on the Engels Air Force Base are in existence and that they are working. They just might still have some issues with targeting the right flying objects. This has to be emphasized. This is unconfirmed as of now. It might just be some rumor that Russia has shot down its own fighter jet over the Engels Air Force Base, but at least this is what is being spread around right now. Along the Eastern Front, not much has changed. It seems that the majority of the attacks were by the Ukrainian side, even though I cannot fully confirm it. Along the whole line, the Russians are reporting massive attacks. There are also reports that they are preparing on an attack onto Crimea from 3 different sides. And there are rumors that the Russians are evacuating Crimea, especially when it comes to their logistics, organizational staff, etc. So in this regard, they seem to expect Crimea to be under threat of being captured in the near future. The Ukrainians, on the other side, are still talking about a build-up of Russian troops along the front line here in Luhansk Oblast, but it is unclear as of yet whether that will mean an offensive in the direction of Kupiansk, maybe Kharkiv, in the near future or not. But as said, heavy fighting. We should not misunderstand that if the front lines don't change, that doesn't mean people are dying. That doesn't mean that there's heavy fighting. But at least at this point, I can say that the front lines don't seem to have changed in any notable way north of the Siversky Donetsk. South of the Siversky Donetsk, there are continued attacks around Avdiivka, around Bakhmut, and especially Soledar and Bakhmutsk seem to be a focal point as of now. But on other lines of the front line, there are also attacks. But the Ukrainian side is now reporting that the Russians increasingly, let me check, increasingly are switching to squad size attacks. We see that here. We can also see the importance of thermals, how potent they are, that a small drone with thermals can watch them come here right away. And you see how small the groups is of supposedly Russian attackers. We are talking about 6 to 10, 15 men at times, which would be an indication that the Russians are running out of manpower in this region again. There have been reports in the past, and in the last situation report, I mentioned that there are indications now here. We see a little bigger group, but it's still like squad size, not even company size. So in the last situation report, I mentioned that there are indications that even Wagner is running out of personnel, and that seems to be confirmed with this, that the manpower of Wagner is shrinking. There are some that are saying the Russian offensive along the Donbas might be accumulating at this very point. It seems to be fairly clear that at least Wagner's efforts have reached their peak as of now and are accumulating at this very point. That does not mean that the Russians cannot attack further using mobilized personnel and refreshed units that have been withdrawn from Kherson, but at least Wagner seems to be running out of steam as of now. It would also coincide, it would be in accordance to what was reported in the last situation report as well, that not only do they run out of personnel, but also ammunition. There seems to be a Russian ammunition shortage along the front line. Mostly it seems with artillery shells, which would be out of the direct influence of HIMARS, that the HIMARS use is pushing the Russian supply dumps so far back that the trucks are overwhelmed to make up for the distance to keep the front line supplied sufficiently. Right now, as said, we can't really say how it's going to be, whether this is actually the accumulation. It has to be expected that it's going to come at some point. The heavy attacks it's unlikely that they will be able to continue endlessly, but that will not mean that they will stop attacking. They might just keep reducing the size of their units in the attacks until they found some reinforcements. Along the front line here, as said, I cannot really confirm any change in possession. There might be tiny changes. We have confirmation about the Ukrainian counterattack in Bakhmut, that they retook some territory, which would be another indication that the Russians run out of steam, that in one counterattack, the Ukrainians pushed them back significantly and probably pushed them back what the Russians themselves have gained over weeks before. But as said, none of those changes are in any way significant to the overall picture, so we can more or less move on from here. The only interesting part is that I have the reports that there have been attacks in the direction of Solotania, Niva, up here, so in the southern area of Donetsk Oblast, there is still some Russian activity, even though the attacks in the past have been more in this direction, and none of them seem to have gained any territory at all. From the southern front, not much to say either. The fortification efforts are continuing, both along the front lines as well as deep into the Russian-held territory. So the Russians are preparing defense in depth. There is nothing changed here. There's nothing changing when it comes to the artillery duels. We have reports about the Russians shelling in cities, towns along the front line. Nothing has changed here. Along the whole front line, artillery fire obviously is continuing not just in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, but also in the other oblasts. Also strikes in the depth of the territory, of the held territory by the opponent. By both sides, the Ukrainians are using HIMARS or probably Excalibur 155mm shells, whereas the Russians mostly use S-300 in this context. Anyways, as we can see, there's not much change in this. We had reports in the last situation report about massive, or at least significant troop movements west of Mariupol. So far, we heard from the Ukrainian side that they don't see any Russian preparation for an offensive in Zaporizhzhia. So wherever those troops go, they might just reinforce defenses. As of now, we don't see any strike groups forming in this region. That's already from the front line itself. I have a little more. We have the usual reports when it comes to the mobilization of deserters, of sabotage against recruitment centers, etc., by Russian civilians, deserters that are being sentenced, etc. We have reports about how is it called? Self-injury. There's a word for it. I just lost for a moment. I apologize. So self-injury by men that want to avoid being drafted. And nothing has changed much in this, but now the Ukrainian military intelligence is saying they expect a new wave of mobilization, a second mobilization wave in the first half of January. So that would be in the next 3 weeks, is where Ukraine expects Russia to call up the next hundreds of thousands of reserves. In the political sphere, nothing has changed much either. We have further reports of children being transported to Russia. We talked about this extensively in the past, that the Ukrainians obviously call it deportations, that the goal is probably to assimilate the children either by adopting them away to Russian parents or by forcing the parents of the children to follow their children deep into Russia, where they are spread out and basically have no other choice than to assimilate, to basically steal Ukrainian children and at times Ukrainian families, which would be in the context of the Ukrainian accusations of genocide, which includes not just killing people, but also attacking their identity and attempts to erase them. There's also, now we have numbers from Zaporizhzhia itself. The Russian occupation authorities are saying they call it evacuated 150,000 persons from the Oblast Zaporizhzhia alone into Russia. So we have the numbers now for just one oblast that is partially occupied, that the Russians have brought 150,000 civilians out of this area into the Russian Federation. Other than that, in the occupied areas, we have further reports when it comes to Ukrainian to nationalization. Ukrainian factories are nationalized into Russian they are being turned over, or you could say stolen, to Russian government by the Russian government, and those companies are now being tasked to support the war effort by the Russian Federation by changing the production accordingly. And where the local workers refuse to work, there are some reports that the Russians are bringing in executives and workers to run those factories with Russians themselves. That was it already for today. Barely 12 minutes, barely 13 minutes, but not that much has happened. And yeah, that was it for today. I hope it was enlightening, it was interesting to you nonetheless. This channel is only possible because of the support from viewers like you. So thank you very much to everyone already supporting the channel. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the descriptions. Thank you again for supporting it. And if you enjoyed it, if you liked the video, then please hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment for the algorithm. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I want to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future updates. That's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.